Hey guys, Miss Shelly here. I'm so excited that we're getting back into new lessons. And we're going to go ahead and jump into topic 5, which is talking about bivariate data. So, we're going to go ahead and start our first lesson in that with constructing and interpreting scatter plots. Now, you may wonder, what do you need scatter plots for in the real world? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask because different things you could use scatter plots in the real world would be say you want to graph the times people visit a store. That could help a manager come up with employee store hours. You know, do they need more workers at 2 o'clock or do they need more workers at 6 o'clock? The data in the scatter plot would probably tell them that they would need more workers at 6 rather than 2. Another thing you can look at a scatter plot to see is when is the best time of the year to go to Disney. You don't want to go when everyone else is going to Disney or even Universal. You want to go when it's least crowded. So a scatter plot can kind of show you the clusters, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and then the gaps. Those are kind of when you want to go. TV shows also kind of use scatter plots to kind of graph the different ages that view their television show. That's just a couple of the many examples of how you can use scatter plots. So let's go ahead and start this lesson by defining what is a scatter plot. So a scatter plot is a graph in the coordinate plane that shows the relationship between two sets of data. So if you have two sets of data and numbers, you can make a scatter plot. It's super easy to make a scatter plot. You just have two steps. The first step, draw a scatter plot, which we already have here. The second step, plot the order pairs. So right here we have this picture from Blast. Now, Blast is tracking data on the amount of social media posts they make per day and the amount of new subscribers they have each day. Because it's kind of a fine line when it comes to social media. You don't want to post too much and then you don't want to really not post at all. So you kind of have to find that middle balance. When is the best time to post? So let's go ahead and let's fill in and do our scatter plot. Now we have an empty plot. That's great. But we need to label our X and our Y axis. We're going to make our X axis the post in days. Because remember, anyone, not just us, who looks at this needs to be able to look at our graph and see everything and answer any questions they may have. We'll make our y-axis the number of new subscribers. Let me write that. Oh, running out of room. That's fine. All right, so now we need to have numbers. It looks like we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. So we'll do our x-axis 1 to 10. The one thing I like about scatter plots are they're all going to be a little different. You may choose not to do 1 through 10. You may want to skip count by 2. It is 100% up to you when you're doing these scatter plots. There's no necessarily perfect way to do it. There is a wrong way if your numbers and your dots don't even make sense. So let's don't forget our 0 down here. Now we're going to go up by 20s. Let's see, I got some 40s, 60s, 80s, 100. 120 is my highest. 40 is my low. We'll just go ahead and count by 20s. That's always easy. Remember, you want to try and make these easy for you, okay? Because not only do you have to graph these, I mean, you got to find them on the number line. So we'll try and make it as easy as possible for ourselves. Okay, so now I have my y and my x-axis labeled. Now I can go ahead and start plotting. All right, so I'm going to look here at 1. So these are my x's. These are my y's. These are my x's. These are my y's. All right, so we can go ahead and graph. So I have 1 to 40, 2 to 44, which we'll say is right about there. Now I have 3 to 72. Remember, I mean, this isn't going to be perfect. Just do the best you can. 4 to 81. 4 then to 96. So this middle line is 90. We'll say 96 right about there. 5 is 110, which is right there, that middle line. 5, we also have 120. Okay, make sure you can see those dots though. All right, now let's go to the other side to 6. 6 is about 104. We'll say that's right there possibly. All right, 6, 104. Oh, let's go up a little. We'll make that first one I did 101. See, it's not going to be perfect, and don't worry about that, guys, okay? We're just going to do the best we can at graphing these, okay? So we'll say that's 95. That'll be 99. And then 8, we have 94. 8, I also have 91. So, I mean, we're going to just do the best we can to separate those. And then 10, you see we drop all the way back down to 62. So if you're looking at this and you're kind of analyzing it, interpreting it, you're kind of saying, all right, well, it kind of looks like you get the most right here. That 5 days. You know, 5 posts a day might be the golden number for BLAST. So good job, guys. That is how we plot it. Let's take a look at 3 different types of scatter plots. The first one we're going to look at is our positive. All right. So here we have positive. As you can see, our Y's axis, they keep going right on up as just like our X's. Our X's go up values just like our Y values go up. Over here for our negative, we can kind of see the opposite trend. Our Y's are kind of tending to decrease and our X's are increasing. So our X's are getting bigger over here, but our Y's are getting smaller. And then let's take a look at no association whatsoever. I mean, look at this. Like you got here to here to here. I mean, you're just all over the place. What is happening? What is going on? Those X and Y's are all over. I like to say that they're cray-cray. They have no association because they're not positive, they're not negative, and their dots don't make any rhyme or reason. So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about 3 different types of dots that we'll find on our scatter dot plots. That's a lot of words right there. So the first thing we're going to look at is what I call what they call a cluster. A cluster is a group of dots or points that lie close together. So we can see an example of that cluster right there. They're all kind of relatively close. Now a gap is this empty space between points, okay? So you see right here we have all this empty where the pink is. That is our gap. And then our little lonely outlier. Oh, look at him. He is all by himself. An outlier is a data point that is set off from the others. It's usually pretty far away from the cluster, and in between the cluster and the outlier, that's where your gap lies. See, pretty easy so far, right? You got this. So let's go ahead and do some practice problems, okay? Let's take a look at this table. It says the table shows the racing times in minutes for the first 2 laps in a race. Complete the scatter plot. All right, so remember, the first thing we need to do is we need to label our X and our Y. So we're going to go ahead and label our X down here, lap 1 minutes. We're going to label our Y lap 2 minutes. All right, so now we need to label our numbers. It looks like all our numbers are under 3 and around 1. So we're going to come here. We'll start with our 0, and we're going to skip a space for 1 and then a space for 2. We'll do the same thing up here. Since we're dealing with decimals, we kind of want to have as much emptiness as possible. Now, oh, that 2 looked awful. Remember, guys, on your own scatter plots, you can set this up any way that you'd like, okay? All right, so now that we have this, we can go ahead and start graphing. When we graph, this is going to be our ordered pairs right here, okay? So our first ordered pair is lap 1 is 2.4, all right, which we're going to say is about here, all the way up to 2.3, which we're going to come up and say 2.3 is right about here in the middle. So that is our first dot. All right, now we have 1.4 and a 1.6, so we're going to say that's right about here. Next, we have 1.6, which is over that line, and 1.3, which we're going to say is right about here. Next, if we're looking, we're right here. We have 2.4 again, but this time we're going to go all the way up to 2.7, which is just above our graph. Okay. Now we have 2.5 and 2.6, which once again is right at the tip top of our graph. Then I have 1.8 and 1.6, which we're going to say is roughly about there. And finally, our very last is 2.2 and 1.5. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and let's talk about this graph, okay? Let's talk about any clusters we may have. Well, it looks like we have about 2 clusters. Here's a cluster right here. And here is another cluster up here. This space right here is our gap because there is no data present between these 2 clusters. And as you can see, we don't have any outliers in this data. So no outliers to report. So there you go, guys. Now, when you are graphing your scatter plot, unless it tells you to identify the clusters and the gap, you don't need to do what I did. I just kind of wanted to give you an extra example of what a cluster and your gap looks like on a scatter plot. So when you are graphing these, all you have to do is just graph the data, okay? You don't need to circle the clusters or draw the lines in between the gaps. Let's take a look at another problem, okay? Now it says this table shows the monthly attendance in thousands at museums in one country over a 12-month period. So we have our months and we have the number of people in thousands. The first thing it wants us to do is it wants us to graph the scatter plot. So let's go ahead and graph. I'm going to go ahead and make this my X and this my Y. So we'll do months down here. I know there's 12 months in a year. Instead of writing 1 through 12 because it can get a little messy, I'm going to do 1 through 12, but I'm just going to skip count and skip a line. So I'm still going to do 1 through 12, but it just gets a little messy if you write every single one. All right, so now I know that my Y's are going to be the number of people in thousands. So I'm going to write number of people. Make sure you also write that in thousands underneath it, okay? That way when people are looking at your data and your graph, they are able to see and understand just how many people, because 6 people didn't visit in the month of May, 6,000 people. And then I am going to skip count. I got some 6, I got 9, 12, 27, 21. You know what? We're going to skip count by, let's do 9. We'll skip 1, we'll do 9. Skip again and do 18. Skip again and do 27. And then skip again and do 36. Okay, so in between each of those, we're going to have counts of 3. Okay, so in between the 0 and the 9 is going to be 3 or 6. In between the 9 and 18, that's probably going to be about like 14-ish. So, okay, now we can plot. Remember, these right here, this is my ordered pair. That's the same as being 5, 6. We're just looking at it as a table. So for the 5th month of the month of May, I'm going to come down here to 5, and I'm going to go up to 6, which I estimate to be roughly right about here. Now I'm going to come back over. I'm going to come back up to go over to 5 and up to 9 now. So that's good. That's good. It might help to kind of check because some of these can get a little dicey when you have so many to plot. 6, 6. Now I'm going to come up here and do 6, 12. I think 6, 12 is going to be a little around here. Now 6 had a big, June had a big old bounce to 36. Now 7, July, we're all the way down to 3. We'll put 3 right about there. All right, so now October, we're going to skip to 10. We're going up to 21, which we'll say is right about there. Now we're going to stick on 10, but go up to 27. Go over to 11 and up to 18. From 18, we're going to go to 24, which we'll say is right about there. Now let's come over here to 12. Let's go to 24, which we just said was right about there. Then 18 again. So it looks like November and December have very similar data points, except I have a 3 for December. All right, so now it wants us to identify any outliers in the scatter plot. So let's take a look. In order to help identify outliers, it's helpful if you kind of circle your clusters. Whatever you didn't circle, my circle got a little crazy, sorry. Those are what we call your outliers. So this is a cluster right here. That's a good cluster. That's a good cluster. So now I'm left with this outlier. And that would be our 636. And then we also don't forget about this little outlier over here. That is our 12.3. So now it's going to ask us, what is a situation that could have caused these outliers? Okay, let's think about it. One thing is, what do we know about June? People are out of school. Typically, they're traveling more. So maybe this, I'm going to write a different color. We'll go blue. Maybe this 636 is due to people traveling. You know, maybe June is busier because more people are traveling. Because there are more tourists. A lot of tourists are going to go into the museums. A lot of locals aren't really the ones that you see going into the museums. Okay, another reason I was thinking about is June is typically pretty hot. Maybe a lot of people went to the museums to kind of escape the heat. Maybe they don't live close to a beach, but they wanted to get out of the heat. Now let's look at our 12.3. So 12.3, that's December. What goes on in December? You got a lot of holidays. So maybe the museum closed early for holidays. Something else I was thinking about, maybe it closed due to snow. You know, a snow day. If it got so bad, people aren't going to go travel to go see a museum if it's snowing really bad. So as you can see, there are multiple different answers for this. You're just going to interpret the scatter plot and put what you think it could be. As long as it's reasonable, you're not wrong. All right, so let's take a look at our final practice problem. I got this graph, which I didn't label. We're going to say that this graph is, let's go shark sizes. So I have shark sizes. My x-axis, I'm going to say that's the mass, their weight in kilograms. And we'll say my y-axis is going to be my length in centimeters. All right, so it says refer to the scatter plot, circle any clusters. Okay, let's go ahead and do that first. So I got a cluster here, cluster, and then I have another cluster up here. Okay, so circle any clusters. I'm going to mark that out because we did that. Identify any gaps. Okay, so let's color this right here. This is a gap. Also, we have a point here and all this open spot. So this too could be considered a gap. Identify any gaps, okay? Now list any outliers in the scatter plot. Oop, look at this little outlier I got over here. I have an outlier at 0, 100. Now, it says, what might this outlier represent? All right, let's think about it. So we're looking at shark sizes. I got mass, that's how much they weigh and how long they are. Maybe, oh, you know what? Maybe it is maybe 0, 100 represents a new baby shark, a newborn shark. It wouldn't weigh a whole lot. I mean, it may even weigh like just tenths or thousandths or 10,000ths of a kilogram. But it would still be pretty long, so that could represent what your shark sizes are. Think about some things that you think that it might represent. Now what I want you to do is I want you to hop back on over to Teams and you're going to have an assignment today. Your assignment's going to be a little different. Instead of being in Microsoft Word on Teams, it's actually going to be an interactive PowerPoint. Make sure you read the directions. The background and any pictures as well as the graph are going to be stuck in the background. You won't be able to move those, but if you need to graph anything, you'll be able to add circles. If you need to type anything, there will be a space there for you to type. So make sure you follow any directions. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. This assignment will be due by Sunday at midnight, okay? If you have questions, I have office hours on Wednesday. Just send me a message and we'll find a time that we can video chat. Before we get off, please know that I miss you all so, so much. I would rather be in class with you right now. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.